Today's video, just like yesterday's video, is about to-do list management, and the application or service is called Trello. Now, the first question is, why different to-do list management apps? Well, there are very different reasons for using different applications, and I wanted to talk about 3 different tools. The first is Workflowy that I talked yesterday about, then we have Trello, which I'm talking about today, and then tomorrow I wanted to talk about Asana. All 3 tools have different use cases, and as you've seen yesterday, Workflowy is a tool that is very simple, that is very straightforward, that is just a list-based tool. And today we have Trello, which is an incredible tool in terms of speed, ease of use, and of course the big thing about Trello, the design and the placement of the to-do lists on a board instead of just the normal list from top to bottom. You have lists that are put next to each other, and a card can move from one list to the other. That opens up many possibilities, and Trello is kind of like paper in the way that it's not really limiting you in many ways. Of course it is limiting you in some ways, like a normal to-do list app like Workflowy is limiting you to just making notes from top to bottom. Trello limits you, you have a board, you have lists, and you have cards inside those lists, but other than that you can name the lists however you want, and you can use them in whichever way you want. But for now, let's look onto the screen to see how Trello looks and how you could use it in your own life. First of all, maybe the biggest thing about Trello is that it is actually a collaborative way of working together, and you can see here already that you have the lists and you have cards inside those lists, and there are people who are assigned to those cards, and that makes it very simple to see who is actually responsible for a card. And I found this very interesting in big projects as well as just university projects with 4 or 5 people. And then you have cards, and these cards actually have a lot of ways to store information. For one, you have the name of the card, then you have the list that is currently living in, you have the members who are responsible for this card, you have labels that are kind of like tags, you have a description that can take markdown, you have files that you can attach, that you can either upload directly or you can assign via Dropbox or Google Drive, and you have these checklists that you can put onto a card that have to be finalized before the card is finished. And of course, like most note-taking apps, you also have a due date that helps you keep track when something has to be finished. These power-ups here might be useful, but as long as you're using the normal free version for a private person or a small team, these are very limited, and I think you can only activate one of those power-ups per board. So better not get too excited about these because there's a limit on them. But the big problem with a tool that is essentially not giving you any restrictions in how to use it is actually to understand or get ideas on how you could use it. To make this easier, I have a link in the description below that brings you to this page, which is trello.com/inspiration. They have essentially created boards for you where you can see how other people created the Trello boards and used them. For example, I have opened this personal and work goals board, and here you can see you have these different lists, which is personal, work, school, social, blog, and health. And then you have each card, and each card essentially is a goal. So you could essentially plan all your life goals or your bucket list or your yearly goals in here. And then you could use the labels, in this case the green and the yellow, for a status. And in this case the yellow means needs work or a review, and the green actually means good or goal already achieved. I think this is a very interesting way to use this, to have a kind of overview situation to see where your goals are and what you want to focus on. The next example I opened here is research iterations. And again, the use of lists is completely different to the first one. In this case, you have the instructions and checklists, best practices, goals, links, participants for the second day. And in this case, they used the colors in a completely different way because they are marking their participants in different colors. And that way they have the insights of the different people marked with the different colors. A completely different way on how you can use the Trello board. Instead of having categories like here, you more have a process or things that are categorized between each other for the process. So the process is to kind of define one after another and then go through these one step at a time. One of the more personal kind of boards are the vacation planning boards, and they seem to be very popular, especially because you can actually attach these images and that way make a kind of a vision board situation. So you actually have those pictures that are put onto the cards, and you can basically see what you're planning planning to do. In this case, you have a to-do to the left, then you have the done stuff. So you can, for example, say to do before trip, and you have to check your expiration dates of your passport. Once that is done, you can actually just put it into this done list, and it's nicely organized that way. And then before the trip, you can also search for different things you want to do. For example, where you want to go to eat, where you want to go for sightseeing, nature activities, and the fun activities, of course. I think this is an interesting way to kind of visually plan your trip, and from this I could also see something happen where you actually put these things into a different board or move these cards to a different board where you actually have one list for every day of the trip, and that way you can put the things you want to do on that day in a list that is corresponding to the day. So you eat in Hawaiian food tours, and then you have the whale watching for another day, and that way you can plan the whole trip beforehand. The last example I wanted to show is this project-based learning. And in this case, it's all about the different stages of a project. So you have the brainstorming and research, you have the design process, the development, testing and evaluation, and then it goes up to branding and presentation. So basically the tasks in this case stay in the list they are in, but they are categorized in the different stages of a project. And then basically you just move through these lists from left to right. So you first have to finish all the things in the left, and then you kind of go over to the next and then to the next, and that way you end up at the presentation stage in November in this case. But to actually show you how I use Trello, I have created this new board, and here you basically see a new project that I'm working on, and you can see the different lists. So I basically have the backlog to the left, which essentially holds all the cards that are not yet focused on. Then I have the next up stuff, which is essentially stuff that I'm going to work on in the next couple of days or maybe this week. And then I have the in progress stuff that is actually currently being worked on, or I already started but have to wait for something on it. Then I have the done list, which is in this case based on calendar week. So we have the calendar week 15 right now, and I really prefer to have this kind of based on the calendar week, because that way I can actually see some progress there. If you have only one done list, it is really hard to see that you actually progress in the week and it's filling up. So every week I create a new list for this done area, and then it starts to fill up, and towards the end of the week I will see a lot of cards in the done list, and that way I also have a way to kind of going back and seeing in which week something got finished. But it's not just great to kind of have this in the lists, it's also great to have the ability to actually put yourself on a card, especially if you would work with other people in a project. For example, I could put myself on this card, so I'm now in charge of this card and essentially making me a contact person. And as you can see on the card, there's this eye icon as well, which essentially means that I'm going to be notified because I'm subscribed to this card. So if someone else leaves a comment, I would get a notification, and then I can answer to that comment because I'm currently in charge of this card. But once I'm actually done with the task, I would remove myself from the list, and in the comments here you still can see who was in charge of the card. But this kind of ensures that I have a clean setup. And also I have my profile, so if I go there and then this cards thing, here I can see all the cards that I'm assigned to. But if I would stay in those cards that are already done, I would still see them here. But I find this view very helpful to kind of know what I'm part of and what cards I have to focus on over the next couple of weeks or even month. But if there would be all the cards that I already have finished, then it would kind of be pointless to have this view or to kind of look at it, because then I would have all kinds of archive data here that is no longer accurate, and it would be hard to filter the current stuff from the already done stuff. Overall, Trello is a very interesting tool and has many ways you can organize your things, as you have seen here. Also, Trello is a very interesting tool in terms of keyboard shortcuts, and it offers a lot of them. Accessing this help screen for the Trello shortcuts works with Shift and then the question mark, but you can also go to your name and then go to shortcuts. This will bring up the same screen, and it will be absolutely helpful to kind of read through these and understand at least a couple of them. For example, the spacebar to assign yourself to a card. Then you also have the D key, which essentially puts a due date, or you can actually select a due date, and you can also give labels just by hitting the L key or the numbers. Overall, Trello in the browser is an amazing to-do list management tool, especially if you're collaborating with other people. Additionally to the browser version, Trello is also available on the mobile phone for Android and iOS. And finally, just a couple of weeks ago, they also announced that these apps are actually working offline, which is super helpful if your internet connection is not that good. A couple things I found out when using Trello in projects is that sometimes you actually need someone to clean out the Trello board or make a kind of weekly review and clean everything up. Also, it's sometimes really good to split up stuff into different boards, because eventually it gets kind of overwhelming to have everything in one board. And for example, a backlog list can get very long, but it might make more sense to have a board that is called backlog, where you can actually categorize things by feature, bug, or other things that you have to do, instead of just having this one backlog list. One thing I really love in Asana and which I miss in Trello is that cards cannot live in multiple places in Trello. So you cannot have a card on one board and the same card also on a second board, which sometimes would be very helpful. For example, if you want to organize a content calendar with a YouTube channel and a blog. So you have different pieces of content coming out on each of these. You want to manage the creation of each piece of content on a different board. For example, with writing, you want to research first, then you want to write it, then you want to review it, then you want to publish it or schedule it on your blog. But with videos, that might be a different process. So you want to have the writing pieces in one board and the YouTube videos in another board, all going through their own process, but you want to have them all in one content calendar to have an overview when things have to be published. But in Trello, this kind of thing is only possible if you actually copy some links and do some workarounds, but you essentially cannot have the same card live in multiple places at the same time. But in terms of speed, Trello is absolutely the best tool I have used out there. It is incredibly fast in terms of synchronization, and the startup or loading time is incredibly fast as well. And one of the best things about Trello is it's basically a free tool no matter how big your team is. But if you're a bigger team or a company, then it might actually make sense to upgrade to the business class tier, because then you get a lot of organizational features that the normal version does not offer. To wrap this up, Trello is a great tool for collaboration and working together on a project. I have linked a couple things in the description below where you can find Trello, these inspiration boards to know kind of what you could do with Trello, and of course also the Android and the iOS app. Please have a look at the tool. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about Trello and how you use it, if you're using it already or if you're using something completely different. Next to the Trello link, you will also find the links to my social media profiles where you can connect with me or ask any other questions. Also, please leave this video a thumbs up if you liked it, share it with someone who might be interested in Trello, and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this every day. I will see you in the next video. Until then, bye.